When I was like little, I was always one of those kids who played school, right? And my grandpa was a math teacher for 35 years, so we had like old math worksheets. I have no idea how to do calculus, but I was like teaching my cousins, so I'd hand out the worksheets and we'd grade them when we'd go over them. I wanted to be a teacher like forever, but then when I went to middle school and I took my first like social studies class, and it was American history, I remember. It was the literal class I teach now, and it was just like, oh my God, this stuff is so cool, and it's so memorable and so important, and it's stuff that we need forever. And I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to be a social studies teacher. But then I got kind of a little discouraged because there's not a lot of female social studies teachers. I'm kind of in the minority in that one. I was like, well, maybe I'll just be a elementary teacher. Then I went to college and had a female professor, and she taught about women in the Civil War, and I just was like, oh my God, this is what I want to do for my whole life. This is what I want to do. I want to be that female social studies teacher. I want to help these kids. I want them to know how our nation was founded and government and all the things that if you have to remember one thing from middle school, it's probably how your government works for when you're an adult. That's all I try to do is tell these kids, like, 1, it's important, 2, you're gonna need it forever, and then 3, I try to make it fun while we're doing it. So one of the things I like to do are I call them surprises. For the 100th day of school, we had a glow-in-the-dark party. So we all wore glow sticks and we played like a glow-in-the-dark game. Did worksheets and highlighter, and we just played different games. For a Columbian exchange, I put together a little restaurant in my classroom. So I put all the desks together, and we made tables, and we had tablecloths and little flameless candles and all this stuff to learn about Columbian exchange and like the different food from Old World and New World and putting them together. And they had to make their menus, and I was their waitress. So we start every year with like, why do we even study history? Because they're always like, it's just old, like dead people, like why does it even matter? So we always start talking about like, well yeah, it might not matter that specific person, but what does matter is how it shaped the future. And then when we get to the government unit, which is really our only unit that's not like old dead people, like it's actually currently happening, it's like, this is why it matters, because you're going to, in 4 years, get to vote. You're gonna get to decide who's in charge of our government. They're excited to come in. And most days they'll meet me when I greet them as they come into the school, and they're like, what are we doing today? I'm not gonna tell you till you come into class, but just like seeing that they're excited and ready to go. And then once we learn something that's important, just to like see like, oh, this is actually gonna matter. Like we did a mock election, and they're like, oh, someday I'm gonna do that for real. And just to see that realization, it's awesome. I'm very type A, so I'm very specific. I do things very intentionally. It's all planned out. It's all like that. And I have been like that my whole life, even as like a 10-year-old. I'm like, no, this is what we're gonna do, and this is the order that we're gonna do it in. And so I've always been one of those kids where you're like, you're just a little different kid. And I embrace it. I think it's gotten me to where I am, and I wouldn't change anything about me. It was also difficult to like make friends and like be a typical 13-year-old in middle school. And so I feel like that's why I just love like being weird and being silly, because weird isn't bad. Weird is just like you being you. So I just let them all be themselves and just be weird. And I do silly stuff, like we'll do 30-second dance parties where we literally just dance to ridiculous music for 30 seconds and then get back on track, or just all the silly stuff that I wish that when I was 13 somebody would have done. I love my students. Like every year I'm like, oh, those are the best kids I've ever had. I'll never have any that I like as much. And then you get your next group and you're like, oh my God, I love them just as much. And just like seeing them every single day, how happy they are to like come to social studies and do fun things, and just, I love the kids. That's it. That's my thing.